Bunchy Carter and Bobby Hutton. Bobby Hutton was the first member of our party murdered by the police, and Fred Hampton and Mark Clark were among the latest. Between those murders, there was a long line of black brothers gunned down by racist cops and black racist cultural nationalists working with the power structure against the revolutionary program of the Black Panther Party. Bobby Hutton loved Bunchy Carter. Bobby Hutton used to develop alter ego relationships with different party leaders, Huey, Eldridge, myself, and Bunchy. His latest, at the time he was killed, was imitating our apprentice Bunchy Carter. He tried to become more politically educated like Bunchy was, and he really dug Brother Bunchy, because Bunchy had been in prison. It wasn't a boasting kind of absurd, I did this much time, and I did that much time, thing that Bobby related to. Bobby related to Bunchy because Bunchy was the brother who had come from prison and was back in the community, working to serve the people. Bunchy also had an air about him that was stylish in the manner and the environment of the black community that little Bobby readily communicated with. This manner is in the poetry that Bunchy would write and recite, and also in the sharp way that Bunchy dressed. The clothes of the people. We all have some sharp clothes, but Bunchy was always sharp, clean, with a sharp suit, pimp socks, and shine knobs. Footnote: knobs are up-to-date stylish shoes with well-shined toes. Pimp socks are men's socks you can almost see through. They are usually nylon. End of footnote. Little Bobby would see Bunchy with a big natural that was kept very neat, a big mustache, a sharp suit, and some clean clothes on, and he really dug the way Bunchy looked. At the same time, Bunchy wasn't a selfish person. Deep down inside, he really loved his people, and he loved them so much that when he saw them doing something wrong, he would curse the brothers out to try to get them to understand the need to survive, to unify, to defend ourselves, and to be revolutionaries and work in the community to serve the people. This is the thing that surprised Bobby. Little Bobby was only 16 years old, and he wanted to be sharp. Living in poverty and seeing Brother Bunchy somehow stay sharp and at the same time be a service to his community kind of showed Bobby that he didn't have to get out of the party. He didn't have to say, well, I'm going to give up the party just to get me some sharp clothes, as some brothers would out of selfishness. Bunchy had arranged it so that on his parole he was receiving a fair sum of money working at a poverty program as some kind of assistant director. That's how he kept himself sharp. When one would first see Bunchy, one might think that Bunchy was a pimp or some kind of hustler off the block, but he wasn't. Not that he didn't know the pimps and hustlers. Bunchy was very well respected and well known throughout Watts and the black community in Los Angeles by many, many people. When he was murdered, the party had to go down and try to talk to some of the brothers because there was some 500 or 600 brothers throughout Watts that put shotguns in their cars and were looking for anything that looked like a member of Ron Karenga's US organization that had murdered him. We tried to tell the brothers that we didn't want a jive war in the black community among black people, but at the same time, we wanted to see to it that those cats who did the killing were prosecuted. We felt that if the power structure didn't prosecute them, or if they used some kind of trick to let them go after prosecution, in the long run, this would prove to the people that the US organization, black racism, and cultural nationalism were ultimately the tools of the power structure, and that they stagnate the people's revolutionary struggle for needed change in the community. One of the cleanest things about Bunchy was his deep seriousness and honesty about the need for revolutionary change. When Eldridge, I, or someone from Central Headquarters would give him an order to stop doing something, he would stop. If he thought he was right, he would come and sit down and argue with us, not in an antagonistic manner, but in a manner that showed that he wanted us to show him where he was wrong, because he still felt that it should be done. but he would stop if ordered to. Bunchy also respected organization, which is another thing that little Bobby picked up from him. Our apprentice Bunchy Carter was killed because a group of blacks, black racists, and cultural nationalists from Ron Karenga's US organization, because the enemies of the people, and in essence, sided with the capitalist power structure. These pig black racists really work with the power structure against their own people, and do it out of a psychological need to hate white people just because of the color of their skin. Bunchy had been working in Los Angeles organizing the Black Panther Party throughout the city. In January of 1968, Bunchy had some arguments and small conflicts with the US organization. Bunchy was concerned about the fact that the US organization had been running around intimidating, threatening, and beating up a number of the people in the community. In the BSU, Black Student Union, and other small factionalized black organizations, Bunchy and the Black Panther Party were not about to be intimidated by anybody. These other small groups asked Bunchy to stop Ron Karenga and take over the Black Congress of organizations that had been formed there and that Ron Karenga was in control of. Bunchy called up and told us that he was going to go and corner Karenga and his boys and tell them they better stop their intimidation of those people. We told Bunchy to forget Ron Karenga because most organizations like his are bootlicking organizations, not representative of the community, and that the people will choose the organization that serves them most. I told him on the phone, what you should do is get out in the community and forget Ron Karenga and the Black Congress too, and go and set up those community offices. You should have 5, 6, or 7 offices set up down there in all the different black community areas throughout Los Angeles. Work from there at serving the people, and move to implement the party's 10-point platform and program, and politically educate the masses of the people. That's what has to be done. Forget Ron Karenga. Bunchy followed orders. He flew up on a plane a week later and wanted to argue his point, but Eldridge and I told him to forget Karenga and us. Bunchy felt that Karenga was going to cause some grave danger to the black community. Our argument was that if he attacked the black community would attack him and remove him. Some months after that, John Huggins was made Deputy Minister of Information of the Southern California chapter of the party to replace the jackanap Earl Anthony, who wasn't relating to the duties of that area of work. John and Bunchy worked very closely to pull the party together in Los Angeles. The incident that led to their murder was part of this work. The Black Student Union at UCLA had been having problems with us for a long time. A $20,000 a year job opened up, director of some kind of community and student program, and the US niggers wanted the job and wanted their puppet placed in control. The BSU did not want them to control the program, and since the Black Panther Party had grown to be an integral part of the black community in Los Angeles, the Black Student Union asked Bunchy and John to come up to a meeting about it on the UCLA campus. The BSU asked them what they thought about Karenga's attempts to control their group, and Bunchy and John just spoke for about 5 minutes. All they said at that meeting was that the students had a right to control their own destiny and power to the students. Then they left. 2 days later, on Friday, another meeting was called. John and Bunchy repeated the same 5-minute power to the students rap. That was the day they were killed, murdered right there in the meeting room by those racist, murdering pigs from us. Of course, Ron Karenga has no political power base with his cultural nationalism and black racism in Los Angeles. He runs around and has a Little Jive office stuck up somewhere. But everybody is aware of his game and his capitalistic set of Little Jive businesses, mainly service stations. Those businesses are not cooperatives. They're not there to serve the people. From his past record and his meeting behind the scenes with the Rockefellers. Footnote: an article from the Wall Street Journal on the meeting between Karenga and the Rockefellers can be found in The Black Panther, February 2nd, 1969. End of footnote. We know that he got those little jive businesses as a handout to trick the community on the concept of blackness and black is beautiful. Ron Karenga had no intention before and has no intention now of working in opposition to the power structure to change the system for the needs of black America. All the murders of party members, Bunchy, Little Bobby, John Huggins, Fred Hampton, Mark Clark, Tommy Lewis, and the brothers who were gunned down prior to Bunchy, plus a host of other brothers who were shot up and killed by cops and racist cultural nationalists across the country, have not destroyed the party. The arrest of our members have not destroyed the party. We pay tribute to these dead brothers of ours and every Black Panther Party member and the people in the community. We will fight against the racist pigs and the black racists who work together to try to destroy the party. Charles R. Garry, the Lenin of the courtroom. If the power structure tried to stop Charles Garry from going into the courtroom and defending people's basic human and legal rights, and stop defendants from seeing their lawyers and having their constitutional rights, Charles Garry couldn't be stopped at all. He's the type of man who would go down to the pawn shop and buy himself a gun to defend his home and himself, because he's got enough insight to know that this system is corrupt. I even heard him say that he doesn't even want to be a judge, not with the way this system is going. He never would want to be a commissioner or a politician. The way he explains it, the institutions are being used by big money and rich businessmen who control them, and he doesn't want to be a puppet for any of them. He said that he made up his mind a long time ago about whether he was going to do his fighting in the streets or go ahead and work for the people and try to do it in the courtroom. We always respect the fact that he made that decision, and we're glad he did, because the people need somebody like Charles R. Garry, who is able to come forth and stand up for the people when he sees things going wrong and to defend the underdog. That is something that we know that Charles Garry has dedicated his life to. I have never seen a person like that, even in the Black Panther Party. Charles doesn't interfere in our politics. Sometimes he can almost see us making a mistake on some specific thing or situation, but if we disagree with him, he doesn't interfere in our politics. He doesn't try to run them or anything like that. Sometimes we found that our political relationships with some organization or group were slightly off-key and didn't work out. Often, it would be something that Charles had run down and told us we were making a mistake about. It's good to have a person around like that who will tell you you are making a mistake, and if you don't agree with him, he's willing to let you learn and still be a beautiful friend and comrade who's dedicated to defending you and who knows you're right. Just to go up to Charles Garry's house. His wife is a very loving and very beautiful person. You're very welcome there. You're a human being. A lot of times we would go over to their house, and if we wanted a beer, we got a beer. If we wanted something to eat, it seemed like it was a real pleasure for Mrs. Garry to be able to fix us some food. A lot of times we would be run down. We wouldn't have eaten. Charles knew it, and I suppose he told his wife quite often that we were running ourselves to death. Sometimes when we got over to their house, we'd be so run down and hungry that she could see it, and she'd start preparing food, putting things on the table, and telling us to help ourselves. This is the relationship we developed with Charles Garry and Mrs. Garry. It is a very human relationship and one we cherish very much. Charles is a cat who doesn't back up from things. Back in the days when he was defending the unions who were striking or moving forth for better wages and better conditions, a lot of police pressure and big-time political pressure was put on many of the unions and the cats who were moving for a higher standard of living. Charles defended them to the end. We heard stories about Charles getting caught out at night by himself 2 or 3 times, and cops jumping out of their cars and snatching Garry out of his car and brutally beating him. A man who took the time to be a lawyer to defend the people realizes and understands the pressures that come from the corrupt government when you try to stand on the side of the people. By finding these things out, I began to understand why Charles never wanted to be a part of the corrupt governmental system. Charles comes from poor, oppressed people. He's of Armenian descent, from people who were destroyed by being scattered throughout Europe and around the world, when Hitler went forth to massacre and slaughter them during his regime. We didn't know every detail of Charles's life, but we can see that he is a man who is dedicated to the survival and the existence of the right to self-determination of human beings. We need a lot more history on Charles R. Garry so we can understand what motivates a man to be such a defender of the people's human rights. One time, we were in Judge Lionel Wilson's court in Alameda County. Charles was defending my wife and me on charges that came when cops illegally entered our house. When Charles cross-examined this Berkeley cop who was trying to show that he had reasonable cause to come in and search our house and arrest us, Charles caught him in a whole lot of lies. Charles knows so much law it comes off the top of his head. He showed that the pig didn't have any reasonable cause because he got him to admit that our house was quiet, that there were no disturbances at our house that night, and it was way over an hour before they came back to arrest me. Artie and I sat there all day in court and didn't say a word. We watched Charles handle it and listened to all the proceedings. Artie felt from the way Charles handled that, the way that he would get up at certain points, and from his style of cross-examining, she felt that Charles was better than Perry Mason. She felt this even before the judge decided that the police had no reasonable cause to be searching our house. The evidence was squashed, and the judge said we should be cut loose and acquitted on the charge. Artie really had a lot of confidence in Garry because Charles sometimes helped us out with family problems. Often I would be very busy, jumping on planes, going to New York, flying back to L.A. the next day, or going away for 3 or 4 days around the country speaking at colleges and rallies. A lot of times my wife would get very disgusted, and I tried to get her to work more with the party. She had a tendency to want to look at TV and take care of the house. I was trying to show her she has to be a revolutionary politician too, even though we have a little boy. She would become very disturbed and make it known that she was very disturbed and didn't like it. She would go and talk to Charles, and Charles would try to get her to understand why I had to be away so much. At the same time, Charles would sit down and tell me that I was going to have to take some time off and be at home as much as I could because my wife was frequently upset because I was so busy with the party. Charles is not the kind of lawyer who isn't one and one with his clients. During Huey's trial, he'd get out and investigate the situation himself. He would talk to people and do a lot of personal investigation. When Bobby Hutton was murdered during the April 6th shootout in which the cops tried to ambush the Panther brothers, Charles was down there on the spot. When our house was raided, he was there investigating the house, how they surrounded it, the size of the apartment, etc. He's always getting into things and digging down in the guts of a case. That's the kind of cat he is. If he couldn't get there, he'd have somebody else do it. Sometimes he'd even get together with Chief of Staff David Hilliard and have David do some investigation work in and around different charges leveled against us, or he'd get some of the brothers to look for evidence. When he leaves the courtroom, Charles is always ready to sit down and talk to us at his office if he has time. He doesn't have much time these days, but when he has time, he is all ready to be one and one with us. Charles is the chief counsel of the Black Panther Party. When I say he is one and one with us, it's based on some kind of practice. It's not just on words or trying to sell somebody something. When there's a brother in jail, he makes it a point to get up to see him and talk to him and interview him. He doesn't let brothers and sisters sit in jail without having some contact with them. He's gotten the other lawyers on Panther cases to see that they have to be one and one with their clients. In the Black Panther Party, He lets the other lawyers who function with and work with the party know that this is the way you have to function with a political organization like ours. He lets the other lawyers know that they have to be one and one with us and work right along with their clients, visit their clients, see their clients, interview their clients, and know their clients. When we hired Charles to defend Huey, Charles went into black history. He took time to study and read up on black history and know it. He met Huey P. Newton, and he expressed to me a number of times how beautiful Huey was, and how he was glad to know that Huey had the political perspective and the insight and human understanding that he had. He said meeting Huey inspired him to really want to know black America better. From time to time, I would drop over to his office, books and other material on W.E.B. Du Bois, Nat Turner, the history of black America, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, and other things. Charles really studied and learned. He didn't only study books, he studied and learned in relating to us. The man is so dedicated to defending us. He sees that we're being persecuted. He knows that it's repression. He knows that the underdog is being denied his human rights to live and survive. When he walks into the courtroom, he doesn't have a gun. He doesn't have a firearm or anything like that, but he's got something that is just as effective. Huey used to say that a newspaper could be sharpened like a double-edged sword. I think that the legal defense that is being placed forth by Charles R. Garry for us is just as effective as a gun to defend ourselves from unjust attack. You see that man work in a courtroom, and all of a sudden the procedure of things is clear in your mind. When you see a DA move and use racist tactics, or when you see a judge literally turn his head and deny your rights and let racist operations and maneuvers go on in the courtroom, Charles Garry is setting forth law that seems clear to you, so clear you could recite it yourself. You're not saying anything, but you feel you want to call that judge or DA who's doing you wrong a racist. And all of a sudden, Charles R. Garry has got the human gall to let the judge know that he's a racist right to his face. It makes you feel good to know that the man is standing up and defending you. In the context of law and legality, he can place forth a man's feelings and a man's desires, a man's innocence, a man's right to survive and live as a human being. He places forth the people's rights. This is what's beautiful about Charles. In studying Lenin's works, his writings and materials, one learns a lot about Lenin's ability to use language to set forth a correct philosophy of life as a human being on the face of this earth, and also about the tactics for achieving a correspondent world through revolutionary socialism. We turn it right back around and we look at Charles Garry and say that this man is the Lenin of the courtroom. At first, Charles was Huey's lawyer. Then he became my lawyer. As more attacks and more arrests came down, we got Charles on all the cases. Pretty soon, he was the lawyer for the entire Panther Party. We've seen Garry's whole firm, Bernard Dreyfus, Al Brodsky, Frank McTernan, Faye Stender, Jim Herndon, and the other lawyers who are associated with them working on Panther cases. They're all very good lawyers. I went over there one day and they were all working on my case, Huey's case, the April 6th shootout, all those brothers' cases, and Eldridge's case. We were filing suit against the city of Oakland, and they had a lot of court appearances to make. The whole office was involved in our cases. They began to handle other legal matters for us, helping us to get our income tax out, and other things like that. That office was humming. We used to go over there off and on. The cats were working 10 hours a day, and we hadn't had the chance to raise their fees for 3 or 4 months at times, but they stuck with us. That's the thing we respect about Charles Garry, about that firm. Those people, the secretaries and everybody, took time to know us. Faye Stender did a lot of beautiful, heavy legal work for us on Huey P. Newton's appeal briefed to the higher courts. The next thing we knew, Charles couldn't handle all the cases. Now, McTernan handles cases. Other lawyers across the country, like William Kunstler, Francis Andrew, Gerald Lefcourt, Sanford Katz, Bill Crane, Arthur Kenoy, and a number of others are also handling our cases. I hope those lawyers see Charles setting an example to defense lawyers, using the legal and proper tactics of the courtroom to bring out the true philosophy and ideology of the party and of any other progressive, revolutionary, and liberal people fighting for human rights and survival in a country that's growing more fascist every day. Charles is always ready to defend us. We've got communication with him on a human level. He's even lost a couple of cases when we actually saw overt racist tactics used in the courtroom. But we didn't jump up and say, "Oh, he loses cases." The human relationships you have with a person are the best thing. We know that Brother Charles Garry will sit up and fight. He is where it's at. When the black lawyers tried to attack Charles just because he was white, we defended him. Charles kept Huey out of the gas chamber. We rightfully give him the credit. Charles turns around and gives it to us for organizing community and political support, but we give it right back to him. The only time that Charles was with me in Chicago was when I was arraigned and charged in federal court in April of 1969 in the Chicago conspiracy case. When we got there, the hallways and corridors of the federal building were packed with about 1,000 people, predominantly black people. We finally made our way through the crowd to the courtroom, but there were a lot of federal pigs at the door who said everybody had to be searched. "I don't have to be searched," Charles Garry said. "I'm one of the lawyers here." "It doesn't make any difference," the pig said. "You get searched." "Judge Hoffman said everybody gets searched." "You're not searching me," Charles said. "You're not going to destroy my integrity in the court. I don't have any guns on me. You're the one who has guns on you. You're not searching me." "Well, you can't come in the courtroom," the pig said. "We're coming in," Charles told him. "If I don't come in, there's not going to be an arraignment. You're not searching me." I was on the other side of the marshal inside the courtroom. A couple of them were searching me, and I said, "Right on, Charles." Charles got all the other lawyers together outside, and he said, "We're not coming in." I was sitting in there, and Jerry Rubin came in, and they pat searched him. One of the other defendants came in behind Jerry. I think it was John Freunds. While they were pat searching Freunds, Jerry Rubin started pat searching him too. The marshal was patting down one leg, and Jerry Rubin started pat searching the other one. "Oh, he's all right. Let him go," Jerry said. "What are you guys doing?" I asked. "These guys are pat searching people," Jerry said. "Here, let me search you," he said, and walked toward the marshal. Pat searched him a little bit and then walked away. I cracked up. "It looks like we're not going to have an arraignment today," I told Jerry, "because if I know Charles, he isn't going to let them be running through his briefcase and searching him. He's already told them that he won't let them destroy his integrity as a lawyer and an officer of the court." All 8 defendants were sitting there. We looked up, and guess who was coming into the courtroom from the rear door where the judge comes through? Charles R. Garry and all the lawyers. "Hey, Charles, didn't they search you?" I asked him. "Heck no. They're not going to search me or anybody. None of these lawyers were searched." Then he walked around and said, "The judge didn't like it because we weren't going to come in, so he decided to let us come through the back way." That was one of the things with them. Lawyers are officers of the court, and you're not supposed to treat them like they're not. That's what he stuck on, those ethics, because they have the human integrity to argue for justice. Judge Hoffman treated the defense lawyers like criminals throughout the trial. You have to imagine Charles Garry in a courtroom. He's a tough lawyer, but he's not tough in the sense that you see the DAs trying to act tough. The DAs also try to act smooth and sneak and slide and pull little legal tricks. But Gary's a tough lawyer, and he doesn't let those little jive sneaky tricks on the part of the DA slide by. I think Schultz and Foran would have folded up in Chicago under Garry, and Judge Hoffman wouldn't have insulted Garry consistently as he did Kunstler and Weinglass. Hoffman later sentenced them to some years in jail for their real human integrity. Garry's got so much law on the top of his head that in the courtroom he comes out fighting. There's no bell rung, but there's a gavel struck. Somebody hollers, "Order in the courtroom," or "All rise, this court is now in session, pursuant to adjournment." Well, Charles is there. He's agile all day long. He's always moving. From the way he acts, you never know that Charles is 60 years old. When he's sitting there and he jumps up to expose a sneaky trick that a DA might pull, they have to watch out because Charles is coming off with so much law and is going to be so explicit, short, to the point, and clear. He's telling the judge that such low-life courtroom tactics shouldn't even be allowed, or words to this effect. This is where Charles is, and if you know Charles, you know he believes in what he's defending. He knows that he's defending something that's right, and he's defending someone who's right. He's really there to defend the trumped-up cases, at least those that we've been in, where you know that railroad operations are going on. He's ready to bring the facts out on matters where you just don't expect it. If you sit up in the courtroom and watch Charles work, he'll come out with certain things in defense of his defendants that you just don't expect. He doesn't take shit from anybody. He doesn't take crap from judges, DAs, cops, sheriffs, bailiffs. They don't mess over Charles because Charles knows the law and he knows that he's defending it right. Some lawyers will let judges and DAs get away with a lot of crap, but Charles doesn't allow this. He won't let them get away with a lot of junk. If there's a judge who respects law and real justice, I don't mean railroading, and I don't mean judges who only say they respect justice, but if there's a judge who respects justice, Charles respects him. If there's a DA who believes he's right, Charles doesn't run over the man. He's able to say, good morning, hello, and how are you doing?" He's that type of person. He never forgets that there are many people who can be wrong, but they are still human beings, and he will treat them in that manner. But he won't let any bigots, racists, or fascists, whether they be sheriffs, cops, judges, or DAs, run over him, and he won't let them run over his clients. There have been cases where Charles has caught judges or DAs trying to pull slick tricks and has exposed them. He has brought the stuff out in courtrooms in some of the Panther cases. I've also seen Charles take a cop's testimony apart on the stand. I've seen him make 3 cops who think they're telling the same story tell 3 completely different stories, so that it sounds as if they happened in 3 different places. This is just a way of saying that Charles is something else when it comes to a lying cop on the witness stand, especially when he catches a cop masquerading as a victim of an unprovoked attack, or when he catches a cop who has violated a defender's constitutional rights. When Charles finds them masquerading like that, he can really eat them up. He takes cops' testimony apart. That's one of the beautiful things that Charles is good at, catching one of those pigs on the stand lying. Besides being our lawyer, our chief defense counsel, Charles Garry is also an honorary San Francisco police officer. He has a special police department badge. Dr. Washington Garner, a black doctor who knew Charles very well, was appointed to the police commission in San Francisco several years ago. Dr. Garner made Charles an honorary police officer and gave him a gold badge. It hit all the papers in the Bay Area. That upset cops all over California, the bigots and the racists, because at that time Charles was right in the middle of Huey P. Newton's trial. We heard wild, crazy, upsetting racist remarks and stories. We read them in the newspapers as far south as Los Angeles. They were really mad. But Charles kept his honorary policeman's badge. He began to receive a lot of threatening letters right after that, and we suspect most of those letters came from racist bigots who were on the police force. Charles started to give the honorary policeman's badge back, but when the bigots, racists, and fools started to scream, Charles decided to keep it. When he was defending Warren Wells, who was involved in the April 6th shootout, Charles took his gold honorary policeman's badge out during a recess and started waving it around. Warren figured it wasn't a real badge and was frantically trying to whisper to Garry, "Charles, Charles, you better put that away, because they're going to arrest you. They'll bust you, man. You can't impersonate a pig, especially nowadays." You can imagine Warren Wells' mind going through all kinds of changes. With Charles Garry being the chief counsel for all the Panthers and the head Panther lawyer, you can imagine Warren's mind going 21 ways, thinking that if one of those deputies saw Charles with a badge, his own lawyer was going to get thrown in jail. Warren got real excited when Charles was playing around with a few of the people in the court during the recess, holding his badge up and saying, "See, I'm a pig too. I'm a pig too." Charles didn't want to upset Warren, and Warren couldn't call Charles a pig at all. No one could ever do that, because Charles R. Garry is a great revolutionary lawyer, a brother, and to our way of thinking, the Lenin of the courtroom. Chicago. Kidnapped, chained, tried, and gagged. Kidnapped. On the evening of August 19th, 1969, we were returning from the wedding of Ray Masai Hewitt, our Minister of Education, and Shirley Needley, one of the sisters in the party. The wedding had been held at the Berkeley Free Church, which is about half a mile from national headquarters. After the ceremony was over, we all piled into Eldridge's car, the one with the telephone in it, and headed back toward the office. Footnote: Eldridge had told Kathleen to make all the payments on the car, turn it over to the party, and to join him in Algeria. When Eldridge had the car, a Plymouth Fury, it had been gold, but we had it painted blue. End of footnote. We were about 3 blocks from the office when a car sped up from our left and swerved in front of us and stopped at the light. The people in the car all seemed to be looking at us through the rear-view mirror. "Those cats look like," Masai was saying. "Pigs!" June Hilliard finished the sentence for him. June was driving. I looked to the right and saw a Volkswagen blocking the entrance to the service station at the corner. 2 other cars came up on our rear. "There's pigs all around us in unmarked cars," June said. All of a sudden, the doors of those cars opened, and agents and policemen began to flood out into the street from all directions. They were running toward our car, yelling, "Get out of the car! Get out of the car!" They were holding .38 revolvers, .357 Magnums, and shotguns on us. There were at least 15 cops surrounding us. If they're going to shoot, they might as well start shooting, because we're just dead, I thought. They were still screaming, "Get out! Get out!" Then I thought they were just going to search the car for weapons, and thought it was good we didn't have any, if they weren't going to shoot us after all. June had gotten out of the car, but the car began to roll because the emergency brake wasn't on. Masai got out of the car also, and I hollered to June to pull up the emergency brake. The door on the side where Shirley was snatched open, and a cop pointed a gun in and said, "Get out! This is the FBI! Out of the car! Out of the car!" "Well, they're going to harass us and arrest us, and that's what it's all about," I said to myself. When June had gotten out of the car, he had been pushed around, away from the door. One of the agents reached in and grabbed the emergency brake. I watched him as he snatched it up. Then he pointed a gun at me and said, "All right, Seale, get out." I pulled the lock latch off, opened the door, and stepped out, with my hands hanging down at my sides, palms open, looking at him, cursing him with everything I could think of, because at that point, all I could see and think of was a form of general harassment. Readily someone said, "Hands over your head, and turn around." They grabbed my shoulder, spun me around, and pushed me toward the car. They began to pat search me, and one cop snatched my right arm and pulled it back and put a handcuff on it. Another snatched my left arm and pulled it back from across the trunk of the car and twisted it the back of my hands toward my back and said, "Let's go, let's get out of here, let's get out of here." They had guns in their hands, and they were pushing me around. They didn't show me any identification. There must have been 15, 20 more police and plainclothesmen there. They all had guns. Some were even dressed in blue jeans, t-shirts, and short-sleeve shirts. I didn't see any uniforms. I was rushed into a car and stuck in the back seat, an agent on each side of me. 3 of them got in the front seat with shotguns, and they drove towards San Francisco. One agent said, "I'm informing you of your rights." He told me everything except that I had a right to contact my lawyer. They asked me if I had anything to say. I didn't answer. They were talking to each other. They were giggling with each other, saying, "This was so easy." In my estimation, they were getting some kind of erotic sensation. They got on their radio and said, "All Berkeley police units and other units surrounding the Berkeley house," I assume they were referring to the house where I live, "can leave. We have suspect in custody." I was brought to the San Francisco City Jail and booked. Prior to the booking, and after I took everything out of my pockets, the FBI took my little phone book away from me. That was my property. They didn't give it back to me at all. I don't know where it is now. I looked around at them, and one of the FBI pigs said, "Now I've informed you of all your rights." "You haven't informed me of all my rights." "Yes, I did. I did it in the car." "No, you didn't. You're a liar, and you know it. You haven't informed me of all my rights." I noticed another pig standing there. I'd seen his face before, a number of times at press conferences and speaking engagements. I know his face very well, because one time at a press conference I walked up to him and asked him if he was a government agent. "No," he had said. "I don't have anything to do with the government. I'm just a newsman. Can I come to this press conference?" "Sure you can," I said. "I just wanted to expose you if you were an agent, so the rest of the newsmen can let people know that there are agents and provocateurs working for the government all around us who want to take things out of context and tell lies." Well, he was one of those cats. From everything I gathered, he must have been an FBI agent because he was there at the jail when they dropped me off. "Haven't I seen you somewhere before?" I asked him. He looked at me and just grinned. He really thought he was Superman. You can just look at a cat and see how he's psychologically goofed up with Superman notions, so brainwashed that he thinks he's defending the so-called free world. There is no free world. How in the world can America be free when somewhere between 40 and 50 million poor, oppressed people are living at subsistence and below? The dude was grinning and he said, "Yes, you might have seen me before." "I've seen you at a couple of press conferences I've had," I told him. "And you got exposed by some of the legitimate members of the press. That's where I've seen you before. And then you denied that you were an agent for the FBI or that you were a member of any racist organization." "Well, Bob, that's how it goes," he said, a shitty grin on his face. I guess he thought he was James Bond or some great white hunter. They tried to get me to sign a statement. "No, I'm not signing it," I said. Then they tried to get me to sign something else. I don't know whether it was an attempt to get me to sign some stupid crap about waiving extradition rights or what it was. "I'm not signing anything," I told them. "I don't have to sign anything." They took my fingerprints and a mugshot and told me to go down the hall and they would give me a cell. I walked down there and spoke to a black cop who said he was a member of the Officers for Justice. He told me to sit down, and I sat down in the little office there. He offered me a cup of coffee, and I drank it. I was rather tired and wanted to go to sleep. I knew that I'd have to wait overnight before getting bailed out, so he gave me some blankets, put me in a cell, and I fell off to sleep. The first indication I had that I was being railroaded on some trumped-up charges in connection with that Connecticut frame-up, what I call a criminal agent, Mission Impossible, Mission Imperialism, Domestic, plot to try and destroy the Black Panther Party, was after I'd been handcuffed on Shattuck Avenue in Berkeley. They were walking me toward a car. They said, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and conspiracy to kidnap and murder in connection with Connecticut." What are these damn fools doing now? I thought right off. Now these cats are out of their minds. And for unlawful flight to avoid prosecution, as they put it. I lay on my bunk in jail, and I said to myself, these damn fools trying to railroad me. They're trying to railroad everybody they can out of the party. They're trying to stop the party from functioning. We knew it was coming, but now they're going to try and trump up something else, and of course on me. I expect to be attacked by the pigs in the government because we know that where we're going is correct and will expose the power structure for its continued oppression of the people. Charles Garry came in about an hour later, and they woke me up. I had made a call to the Black Panther Party headquarters before I went down to the cell and told them that I was in the San Francisco City Jail, so they'd know where to send Charles. Charles Garry came in, and we started smiling at each other because we knew that the racist cops had really gone overboard again in their attempts to try and destroy the party and the party leadership. The next day, I was taken over to the federal building. It was the day after the arrest. McTurnan, Garry's partner, came in to see me, and I said, "We'll have to post a bail, won't we?" "Yes," he said. "Well, let's just get a bail," I said. "We'll go from there." They really didn't have a warrant yet. The next day, they still didn't have a warrant. I appeared in the federal court in front of a U.S. commissioner, and McTurnan argued that bail of $25,000 was too high, and that I hadn't fled anywhere to avoid prosecution. McTurnan said that I was watched 24 hours a day, that I'd been in the public eye continually, making speaking engagements on TV in Los Angeles, speaking to 4,000 people at the National Committee to Combat Fascism convention, holding press conferences everywhere, even in that very building. So what did the government mean by claiming that I was fleeing to avoid prosecution? The commissioner said he had no jurisdiction over that and could only set the bail, which he said would be $25,000. So I went back to the cell in the federal building. I could see a whole crowd of San Francisco policemen and also what looked like plainclothesmen coming up with prisoners. At that point, I couldn't tell whether they were local San Francisco plainclothesmen or federal marshals. They were running around in a frenzy and trying to look over at me every once in a while. They'd shake their heads and all this kind of stuff and run around. 2 hours after that first appearance in the federal court, I was called back again and bail was posted, $25,000 in a cashier's check. And at that point I said, "Good, now I can get out of here and get this crap straight and go talk to Garry and everything." Charles was in the middle of the Warren Wells shootout trial, so McTurnan was substituting for him. When I got ready to leave the commissioner's court, the marshal said, "Will you step back here first?" I thought to myself, now wait a minute. They have already booked me. They repeated, "Step back here." I remembered that the last time I was there for the Chicago thing, when I posted bail, I had to come back through there, and I thought that that was where they processed you out. But no sooner had I gone back than they said, "Well, you can wait in the cell right there." So I stepped back into the cell. The door was still open, and 30 seconds later, a cop in plain clothes walked back and said, "I'm from the San Francisco Police Department, and you're under arrest." What kind of crap is this? These cats are really out to railroad me. I just got through posting bail. What the hell are they going to arrest me for now? They brought me back and put me in the city jail. They said they had a warrant from Connecticut on the trumped-up charges of murder, conspiracy to murder, and kidnap, but they didn't actually get it until several days later. As soon as they had me in the county jail, they dropped the phony, unlawful flight charges. They just used that as a pretext to kidnap me. Garry had put in a subpoena to get an assistant to Attorney General John Mitchell to appear, but the judge revoked the subpoena, which I didn't dig. Here you are, you need to be able to subpoena somebody and get some information and try to find out who's plotting what, but the power structure and the courts operate like that. They stick together against the individual who has certain rights. You have to have a right to subpoena a person. I don't give a damn if it's the President of the United States. He should be subpoenaed. The reason we had subpoenaed one of Mitchell's assistants was that McTurnan attempted to call the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C., and asked them some questions concerning the Chicago case that they had against me. They told him on the phone that this Assistant Attorney General, Victor Warhide, was in Connecticut. Warhide is the head of the Special Panther Unit in the Justice Department. That was about a week before I was arrested, which puts the federal government there in Connecticut working in conjunction with the state and local officials of New Haven and Connecticut to plot this thing against me. So naturally, we wanted to have him in court as a means of bringing out some of these erroneous charges. It also came to light in court the next day that there was no warrant out for me when I was arrested, but they had used this unlawful flight to avoid prosecution charge to hold me. It didn't make any difference. They set a date for extradition, and I was put in the San Francisco County Jail, which is on the floor above the city jail. I sat up there for 3 weeks, and Garry visited me when he could, and McTurnan would visit me and give me information. A few days after all this, McTurnan came up and told me that it looked like Garry might have to go to the hospital. I'd have to send in a motion to Chicago that I wanted to have my lawyer, Garry, as the only lawyer to represent me. He was the only lawyer I had chosen, and the only one I had conferred with. I was to respectfully ask the court to postpone the date of the trial to a later date until my lawyer could appear. I also signed a document by which I was informed that it was mandatory that Garry go into the hospital before he tried another case, unless he wanted to risk his life. Garry came to see me a couple of days later and told me that he had been in Chicago and that the judge had denied a postponement. He said the judge was going to try and choose a lawyer for me. To Chicago in chains. I was sitting in San Francisco County Jail one evening when Charles Garry rushed in and said, "They're going to move you tomorrow." Tomorrow? They can't move me. They're not supposed to move me if I'm waiting for an extradition hearing. They're plotting a whole operation to get me to Chicago and try to extradite me from there. I know that rotten Mayor Daley is going to see to it that the state of Illinois extradites me to Connecticut. Before Garry left that evening, I told him, "Look, man, when I get to Chicago, I'm not letting those cats choose a lawyer for me, someone I've never spoken to. They don't have any right to do that. I think I'll be better off defending myself if you can't make it there." He said, "Well, we'll have to confirm it, but it looks like I'll have to go to the hospital for a gallbladder operation." "All the other cats have lawyers," I said. "The only thing I'll agree with those other lawyers on is that they can handle my pretrial motions, but the only person I'll go into court with is you. The judge will have to see my point of view because I'm going to fire any appointed lawyers. I'm not going to let the judge choose anybody else for me either." Garry said, "Okay, you have the legal right to do that." And he also told me that I had a right to request a lawyer of my choice. The sheriff and the jailers didn't know anything about my being moved, so I told them that I wanted a shower early in the morning and that I wanted to get all cleaned up because I was being taken out. At first, they kept telling me I didn't know what I was talking about, but later they allowed me to take a shower and shave. I packaged what little property I had, cigarettes, writing paper, handkerchiefs, etc., and they put it in a box, tied it up, and took everything out of my pockets. After I was dressed, they put a chain around my waist. It had a little clip on it, with an extra piece of 7-inch chain hanging down. Then they put 2 sets of handcuffs through one of the links in the chain and put both sets of cuffs on me. They brought out 2 more prisoners and put some leg irons on all of us. I had a leg iron on the left leg attached to another prisoner's right leg, and a leg iron on my right leg attached to the other guy's left leg. They walked us to the elevator like that, took us down to the basement, and put us into a federal government paddy wagon. 3 of the guards got in front with their pistols drawn, and 2 more got in back with shotguns. They drove us over to the federal building, where they took our chains off, then put them right back on again. We had the same type of chaining around the waist, with double handcuffs and leg irons on. The cat who sat in the middle had leg irons on both legs. So each day throughout the trip, we would trade places. The leg irons cut at your legs. I happened to have boots on, and I persuaded the guards to put the irons around the boots so they wouldn't cut my legs. The other 2 prisoners caught it a little more. They caught it real bad. Their irons were way down on their legs, and if somebody happened to accidentally pull the chain, it would cut into your skin. They hustled us into a regular car, a sedan, put a shotgun on the floor, and one of the cats sat on the right-hand side in the front, and the other marshal sat on the left-hand side and drove. They drove out through the city, and as we went up the ramp on the freeway and started toward the Bay Bridge, a highway patrolman was right there, and he fell in behind us. As we went by the main police station, another highway patrolman got in front of us. That's how we went across the bridge. At the toll plaza, a 3rd highway patrolman pulled in behind us. We then headed north on Interstate 80 to Sacramento. One of the other prisoners was a white guy named George, and they were taking him back to a Midwestern federal penitentiary. He had been in some big shootout on the West Coast. They were taking him to a maximum security prison because he had already escaped once. That's what he and the marshal started talking about as we were going north toward Richmond and Vallejo. The 3rd prisoner was a young cat named Joe who had supposedly robbed the payroll. After the robbery, he had walked up to an airline's office and asked for a ticket on the next plane going to Canada. When he was told there were no planes going to Canada right away, he asked where the next plane was going. They said Mexico, so he said, "Give me a ticket on that right away." He had a bag full of money, and the way he told it, he took the money right out of it and paid for the ticket. He flew out and was picked up a few months later. He's a white cat, of course. If a black man had asked for a ticket to Canada and then taken a ticket completely in the other direction and reached into a bag full of money, he would have been surrounded by police in a minute. That just goes to show you the racism in this society, the way people's minds function. They were taking him to a federal medical center for some kind of observations. He was supposedly considered wacky. What he did was walk into a department store and say, "Give me your payroll," and then walk out. But if he'd been a black man, he wouldn't be wacky. He'd be dead or railroaded into prison. While we were going past Berkeley on the freeway, and for the next 10 or 11 miles after we got out of Richmond, 5 highway patrol cars were escorting the whole scene. Most of the cars had 2 cops inside. George got to talking to the marshals and he said, "You know, I want to escape. I escaped before, and if I get a chance, I'm going to do it again." The marshal said, "Yeah, we know it." And they talked about the way in which they transport prisoners. I didn't have much to say at all to anyone at that point. All the marshals would say to me were things like, "Well, when it comes down to it, what you want to eat?" They had to stop at hamburger stands. That's all we ever got. $1 a meal was allocated to us. Usually we got a hamburger, a milkshake, and maybe some french fries, and that'd be about it. We eat with our handcuffs on in the back seat. We weren't chained to the inside of the car because there's a federal law against that. As we drove on, I watched the countryside. I always liked the outdoors until it became too vicious, when crazy trigger-happy hunters killed people while deer hunting. My father used to take me to the mountains when I was younger. I wasn't really too hip to it,
because we were really living in poverty. But every time my father would make a little bit of money, he and his friends would go hunting. All I wanted to do then was go hunting with him. I did a lot of traveling up and down the state of California, from Los Angeles to Mount Shasta. As we drove, I saw landmarks that I knew and places where I had done farm labor work when I was young. After Sacramento, we drove through Marysville, a small town where I had once been picked up in a railroad station when I was 17 years old. I had jumped a freight train with Steve Brumfield. We roamed the state together, hitchhiking around for 2 or 3 weeks at a time without any aid from anybody and living on wild fruit and stuff like that. When we were picked up in Marysville, we were on our way to South Dakota because we identified with the American Indians. My mother is part Indian. We wanted to see the Black Hills, where Custer had got his head whipped by Sitting Bull and the Blackfoot Sioux, who roamed those areas of Montana, Wyoming, and the Dakotas. When Steve and I were picked up, we stayed overnight in a juvenile detention place until my father came and got us out. The marshal stopped in Marysville, and we ate there. The marshals let us sit down at a table and eat. One of them asked me what I considered a silly question. He said, "You guys want to eat out here? Some guys don't like to let other people walk up and see them chained down and everything." "Man, it don't make me no difference," I said. "I'm a political prisoner. It's up to these cats here." They said they didn't care either. So we sat out there and ate for about 20 minutes. At that time, I didn't know it, but Alan Brodsky, one of Charles Garry's partners, had been arguing in court back in San Francisco for me, and the judge had ordered that I not be taken to Chicago. The U.S. Marshal kept on stalling. He said I was gone and they couldn't get in touch with our car. All they had to do was contact the Highway Patrol escort which followed us all the way to the Nevada border. I did notice that once when we stopped, the marshal who was in charge made a phone call. This was around noon. The judge had given the order at 11 a.m. I found out later, and at noon we were still in California. Legally, I should have been taken back to San Francisco. The marshal must have called San Francisco because the next morning after he got us out of the jail in Reno, he told me that a lawyer had gone to bat for me yesterday and had done a pretty good job. He asked me if I knew an Al Brodsky. To go to the bathroom with leg irons and handcuffs on is a motherfucker. The other two guys have to wait. We were all still chained together with the leg irons. There's a little play on the chain that drops down from the chain around your waist. You have about 7 inches to move your hands up and down. The handcuffs are attached to the 7-inch chain. After I opened my pants and urinated, I would step to the side and let the other guy go, and then the third guy. And then we go on around, and one of us would slowly hobble to the face basin and bend real close. We'd have to get right up on it and get the water turned on and wash our hands. If the towels weren't too high, we could reach up and pull the towel. If it was too high, the marshals who were watching us had to get us the towels. That was the kind of situation I was in for 7 days on the way to Chicago. You just couldn't sit on the toilet if you had to. The only place I could have a bowel movement was inside the jails where we were left overnight. The first night we stayed in a filthy jail in Reno. I was put in a one-man cell by myself. There was only one little blanket full of holes, a bunk attached to the wall, and a foam rubber mattress about 2 inches thick. Before I was put in that jail, I told the marshal that I wanted to call my lawyer because no one knew where I was. All he had to say was, "Well, we'll see about it." "Don't I have the right to call my lawyer?" I asked. "We'll have to see about it," he repeated. He didn't see about anything, so every day throughout the whole trip, I asked to call my lawyer and was never allowed to do so. In the Reno jail, one of the trustees, a brother, came around. I tried to talk to him, but the guard was looking. It flashed into my mind that maybe the trustee was allowed visitors and I could get him to tell somebody to call Oakland and tell my lawyer where I was. The guard was still looking at me, and when the trustee saw me trying to talk to him, he shook his head slightly, moving it a half inch or so, to tell me, "They're on to you."
The next day, we were chained again and drove all the way across Nevada, eating lunch midway across the state. We were again escorted by state police cars, one in front and one in back. During the day, I had one short conversation about what the Black Panther Party is all about. Both the marshals were white, and Joe and George were white dudes also. I ran down the 10-point platform and program, and afterwards they asked questions. I tried to show them all the misconceptions about the party that had been printed in the establishment news media. We drove across Nevada, through the Salt Flats into Utah to Salt Lake City, where we were placed in a jail overnight. Each time we were taken inside a jail, they took off the handcuffs and chains, booked us, and took mug shots. Every jail did this, except for a few, like one in Wyoming and a small town jail in Hays, Kansas. All the way to Salt Lake City, I thought of the Mormons and of Lowell Jensen, the district attorney in Alameda County who prosecuted Huey. Jensen is a Mormon. I thought about their racism. If Jensen at all represented their outlook, these people were rather backwards too, with racism manifested in them. I went over in my mind the facts I knew about the Mormons. For one thing, they say black people cannot go to their heaven. A few black people are stupid enough to join their church, but they are treated no better than slaves or animals. Their avowed concept of a race category shows the basis of their supremacy doctrine. This idea has survived from the old one-headed God system of Europe. In Salt Lake City, I saw the Mormon symbol everywhere. There were pictures of a seagull, like those who supposedly came down and did in the locusts, who were destroying the crops in the days of Brigham Young. I also thought about the fact that what Brigham Young and the early settlers talked about were cooperatives, which are very socialistic. If you're going to build a socialistic system, or if you're going to establish socialism, racism has to be rubbed out completely. It's impossible to have a socialistic system and racism together, and maybe that is the real reason the Mormon cooperative concept wasn't able to survive. They have people like Lowell Jensen who railroad Huey to jail by changing the trial transcript. I thought that when I got inside that jail, they might treat me badly, but all they did was book me. The brothers inside that Salt Lake City jail knew that I was there that night. The information got around. It was a very modern jail. When I say modern, I don't mean to say that I like jails, but this jail would cover a square city block. Half the jail's down underground. The tiers are built from under the ground up. I looked at the jail and I looked at the little nozzles and things around. The jail in Salt Lake City reminded me of a streamlined concentration camp. Very much so. The tier I was on was 25 feet underground. There were very long aisles and very few people around me. All the doors opened and closed electronically. It's a completely electronic jail. I was put in a cell by myself, isolated from other prisoners. This particular tank did not seem to have been used much. It had little skinny mattresses that went on small steel bunks riveted to the wall. I requested a shower and I got it. Then I washed my shorts, t-shirt, and socks, and later they brought me some food. The marshal was trying to be nice and went out that night and bought me a 79-cent box of chicken and a 20-cent milkshake with a few French fries thrown in. I had been so cramped up in the car all day that I did 100 push-ups in sets of 10s to exercise and loosen myself up. It wasn't until I tried to go to sleep that I got pissed off again, because I knew that I was really in a kidnap situation and I couldn't call Charles Garry in San Francisco. When I arrived at that jail, I again asked the marshal if I could call Garry, and he said, "We'll see about that," but he still wouldn't let me do it. The next morning, they came and completely shackled us down again. We ate breakfast in the jail before we left that morning. After we were shackled down that morning, we were driven all the way across the state of Wyoming. As soon as we came to the Utah-Wyoming border, the Wyoming highway patrolmen got right in behind us. Those cats were really feeling their oats. I can tell when cops are itchy and trigger happy. We'd stop to eat lunch, or get out to go to the toilet, and these cops would stand 20 feet away from us in a guarding position, their arms folded, ready to draw their guns. If I looked at them, they dropped their arms down to their sides. I knew they had weird notions and misconceptions about the Black Panther Party. Maybe they thought I was going to whip out a gun or something. Here I am, all shackled down and everything, 3 of us all hooked together, we can't move or anything, and they're standing 20 feet off ready to draw their guns. They called it security. As we drove, one of the marshals was telling me about transporting some other prisoners, 3 brothers, who asked him, "What concentration camp you taking us to?" "Why don't these guys think that?" the marshal asked me. "We weren't taking them to a concentration camp. We were just transporting them from one prison to another. Where did they get these ideas?" "Well, the basic fact is that concentration camps do exist in America," I said. "There are some laws on the books that say concentration camps can still be used. They'll probably use them for the Black Panther Party." "No, it'll never happen," the marshal said. "America will never let black people be exterminated." "Are you kidding?" I said. "Black people have been slaughtered and murdered and lynched and brutalized for centuries. 50% of the people in prison and jails don't even need to be there. 25% are hardcore criminals who really need some type of rehabilitation. The other 25% are just sick and need really good psychological treatment in hospitals." I told him the 50% who don't need to be in prison just need jobs. There are over 1 million people in the prisons. Those are the initial concentration camps. I told him I thought the cat was right in asking what concentration camp he was being taken to. "The southern work farms are nothing but concentration camps," I said. "Some cat down in Texas got 99 years in prison because he drew a gun in the process of holding up a store. Nobody was killed or anything like that. No shootout occurred, but because he held up a liquor store and was black, he got 99 years. Another cat, Lee Otis Johnson, got 30 years in Texas because the cops found 1 marijuana joint in his possession. Johnson is a political prisoner too. His real crime was that he was a SNCC organizer. In prison, those guys go out and they work like dogs. They are enslaved. These are our initial concentration camps," I said. "The prison system doesn't rehabilitate and doesn't really serve society." But the marshal still said, "I don't know what you mean, talking about fascism. America's not like that." "Well, it's happening right before our eyes," I said. "It's on a small scale, but it's rapidly growing." We drove all the way to Laramie. When we got there, a funny thing happened. The Laramie City Police joined right in with the 2 highway patrol cars, the 1 highway patrol car in front and the 1 highway patrol car in back. So as we came into Laramie, 2 city police cars joined us. 1 drove in front and 1 came on in back. It was a real big thing with them, I guess, to have me overnight. But I have to give the old sheriff in that town credit. He didn't treat us badly. He lives at the jail with his wife and family, and they cook the food there. The prisoners get the same thing that the sheriff and the police eat. The jail itself was clean and roomy. We witnessed an accident from the jail window down below us. What I noticed about the police really inspired me. 3 or 4 cars collided. When the city police arrived, I saw community control of the police in action. The police knew the guys who were in the accident. They were all part of one community. Just like when we say community control of police, we want the police to live in the neighborhood that they patrol. These policemen didn't treat the people who were in the accident brutally. A couple of them were drunk and were talking loudly and foolishly. "Oh, come on, cool down," the cop said. The police didn't mess over them. Nobody was beaten or dragged off to the goddamn jail. I'm pretty sure Indians get treated rotten in Laramie, but among the white population, there is community control of police. That's what I told the other 2 cats who were in the same cell with me. This was the first time we were in the same cell, Joe, George, and I. It was a small town county jail, so they just stuck us in together. I talked to George and Joe that night, and I told them a lot about the Black Panther Party,
After hearing me, they realized that they had misconceptions about us. George was about 35. He was out of the South. He wasn't innately prejudiced, though, and he was interested, so we talked and transferred different ideas back and forth. His misconceptions about the Panthers were from the press. At first, he actually thought we just hated white people, but he learned that we didn't, that what we hated was the brutality and corruption of the society. I even showed him where poor white people were impoverished and oppressed, not as bad as black people, but they were impoverished and oppressed too. When I said they should actually oppose the system, he readily agreed with me. George was a righteous bank robber. He and his partner had gotten on the 10 most wanted men list of the FBI. They were outright bank robbers. There aren't any other words to describe the cats. The way George ran it down, they had already been sentenced to 50 years in a federal penitentiary. Joe was about 21. He was a bank robber too. This kind of political conversation was quite different from the conversations they had with other prisoners. Generally, they talked about how to pull a bank robbery or something like that. I tried to project their minds into the political situation in the society. We went into what causes a cat to be a bank robber. They agreed that this society as a whole oppresses people, that it brainwashes everyone. They agreed that racism was in this society and needed to be removed. They said they never had any real ill feelings against black people, nothing like that. But in the past, they had been brought up with a misconception of supposedly being superior to black people. They even said they were surprised to find out that the Black Panther Party seemed to have an intelligent perspective about what's going on in America. I'm pretty sure that neither of them, especially George, felt that I was a threat just because I was a Black Panther. They realized I wasn't a black racist. We talked things over and came to an understanding. The next morning, they chained us down again and we took off. We went through Colorado and passed a place called the Cooperative Farmers Association. I thought to myself, I wonder if that's anything positive, something socialistic. All the farmers in America should be in some type of cooperative. We didn't stop in Denver. We passed by the airport and then the marshal pointed out the county jail. That's the only place those guys know. Naturally, I had already been thinking about whether or not we were going to stop there. Langdon Williams and Rory Hythe, both Panther leaders from San Francisco, were in the Denver jail. They're both in on the same Connecticut charge that I'm on. They were visiting Denver, and the FBI raided the Denver Panther office and arrested them, charging them with conspiracy and murder. We stopped at a service station outside of Denver, and the marshal made a phone call. They didn't have any escort, but they let us get out and stand up and stretch. It was kind of isolated. Big fields on the side of the service station right off the highway. I said, "How come you guys don't have an escort across Denver?" He said, "Oh, this county here and the federal government and some other people here in Denver disagree with a few things, including the price the government pays county jails to hold federal prisoners overnight. They have some disagreement about a few things." I gave this a thought. Maybe the governor of Colorado was mad enough at the federal government not to extradite Brother Langdon Williams and Rory Hythe. We got back in the car and drove and drove. We went from Colorado into Kansas. The trip took us across Nevada, Utah, north through Wyoming, down to Denver, Colorado, and then east across Kansas. That's the first time I'd ever been in Kansas in my life. We finally came to a city named Hays and stopped at the Ellis County Jail. The jail was a large building. They put us in a cell with 3 other prisoners. We ate fried chicken, peas, everything the jailer and his family had. He lived in the jail and his wife cooked the food. He was an older cat who didn't like hippies and long hair at all, but he seemed to be a nice person. In that jail they had TV in the tanks for the prisoners, and there were razor blades and aftershave lotion, magazines, cards, checkers. You name it, they had it. The guards wore civilian clothes. There were 4 tanks with 4 bunks in each tank in a large day room. It was a clean jail because the prisoners had painted it. You went out across the hall after you came out of the tank into the day room. Close behind the bars was a telephone. The sheriff said, "If you need anything, just pick the telephone up and let me know." You could stay up as long as you wanted. It was the best jail I've been in my life. But I still hate jails. One of the prisoners got into a conversation with me about how to make millions of dollars. They said all the hippie and yippie stuff could be profitable. "Bobby, with your organization, boy, we could really clean up, you know," one guy said. He was a southern white cat. Deep down inside, I knew he was a racist, the way he was relating to some wild capitalistic adventure. But that's how he'd been oriented in this society. The other prisoners talked about 3 black people who had recently pulled a jewel robbery in that town. Hayes is a college town with only about 10 blacks at the school. It's a very isolated place. Some blacks were driving through the town and went into a jewelry store, and one cat picked up a pouch of jewels, went out the door, got in the car, and drove off. It wasn't an armed robbery. They were caught right away. One white guy in the jail said, "Man, them black guys, they sure shouldn't have done that thing in a place like this. I can understand doing it in Chicago or somewhere where there's a whole lot of colored people, but a place like this is so isolated that they got spotted at a drop of a hat and busted. It was a big thing on TV when they got caught." The next morning we had breakfast in the jail. The marshals came and we were handcuffed, double handcuffed, shackled, and chained again. We drove across Kansas all the way to Missouri. I had never really seen that type of countryside before. It was completely flat, with a lot of tall corn growing throughout the area. One of the things about traveling across the country is that you see the vast, vast amounts of land we have. I thought about how this government continues with the private property concept with all that unused land, when there are black people, brown people, and American Indians cooped up on reservations and in ghettos. With modern technology available to irrigate and build reservoirs, why is it that black people can't have some of this land? We were promised 40 acres and 2 mules when we were freed from slavery. This was the thing that really hit me on that trip. I thought, here I am, kidnapped by the federal government, and all I'm doing is fighting for some land. I'm trying to contribute to the struggle so we can have some freedom, which is manifested in having some land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. These are the things I thought, looking at all that tall corn grow, looking at all the vast amount of land that wasn't even being used, and there are our 15 million people hungry in this country. We were driving on a narrow 2-lane road in Missouri. It was raining, and I thought, what if they have a wreck? What would happen to me? I thought to myself about Everett having escaped before. He would probably try to get that gun from one of the marshals, and then he'd definitely get the handcuffs, keys, and escape. But I didn't have to escape. I was on a political charge. If I escaped, everybody would believe I was guilty of all that jive, those trumped up charges. At the same time, I knew darn well the power structure is going to move and do everything they can to try to convict me and railroad me into prison and the electric chair. We finally arrived at the federal medical facility. As we drove in, they stopped us by this little microphone through which a cat talked, sitting in a tower 20 feet above us. While they unlatched Joe, a guy with an M1 rifle stood above us. One of the local marshals came outside and got him, and they took him in through a basement. Then the marshals got back in the car and drove on over to the county jail. This was the dirtiest, filthiest jail I'd ever been in. The sheriff was an old cat with an old gun slung off his hip. I have never seen such a filthy place. When I say filthy, you have to imagine what I'm describing, and I'm not exaggerating 1 pound. The cells had crud in all the corners, 1 inch and 2 inches thick. It smelled like it'd been there for years. The bunks were only 2 feet wide, and with little mattresses that were ripped open and filthy, with bugs crawling all over them. You could knock some bugs off. You look down at your hand, and there were some more bugs. When they hand you your food, there's flies and shit in it. It looks like slop. It was just a run-down, filthy, no-good, dirty jail. A place that almost made me vomit. In that raggedy little jail, the guards didn't bother us. The trustees wore blue jeans and t-shirts. The other prisoners had their regular civilian clothes and had to sleep in them. There weren't any blankets, no blankets at all. About 4 or 5 trustees gathered up in front of the cell that me and George had been put in. They asked us who we were and where we were going. Most of them seemed amazed at George's adventures and would ask him questions. They asked me who I was, and I told them I was Bobby Seale. They didn't know the name. Then George said, "This is Bobby Seale, the chairman of the Black Panther Party." "A Black Panther? Hey, fella, are you really a Black Panther?" "Yeah, man, I'm a Black Panther. I'm one of the members of the party." "Gosh, those guys that got the guns and shoot at the police?" one white trustee said. "I know a fella here who's a Panther. He didn't take nothing from nobody round here, and boy, he shot it out with them cops. I tell you, man, I'd be out there too if they got to messing with me like they mess with y'all. I heard they really mess with y'all." He seemed to be on this vicarious relationship trip about some weird stuff he probably read in the sensationalized local papers. Another trustee got to talking about how he was doing 30 days and how he lost his hog farm and his wife was having a baby. He was in there for pushing a lollipop down the mouth of one of his kids. There were 2 more prisoners in our cell. One black brother was getting ready to be sent to the penitentiary for 3 years. He said he had committed a burglary, got cut loose on the first one, and when he needed some money, he went back and committed another one. He had heard about the Panthers, and I tried to talk to him about the party a bit. There wasn't a chapter in this town. I was told there are quite a few black people in that town, but a lot of them go to jail because there aren't a lot of jobs around. He also said there was a lot of racism and police brutality. There was another tank where they kept juveniles. They separated them from the other prisoners, who were mainly just regular, everyday poor white cats. Southern type cats who still don't understand the fact that the power structure oppresses them. The next morning I noticed I was scratching and itching. Bugs were all over my body, and I had to take my shirt out. Later on at Cook County, I found out I had caught the crabs in that filthy jail. Our next stop was the St. Louis City Jail, where the marshals left me for an hour and a half. The place was crowded with black cats. About 150 of them were being processed. While I was getting out of the car in front of the jail, I could see prisoners hollering down at the people walking outside on the sidewalk. One of the cats said, "Black power, brother," to me. A white man was walking along there in the city, and the same prisoner hollered, "Where you going, honky?" I knew that these brothers were getting turned into black racists. They still didn't understand. That sounded like he hated the white man because of the color of his skin. Brothers like that lash out emotionally in a racist manner before they realize the necessity for politically organizing the people. We're all products of this racist society and need more revolutionary consciousness. Inside, they had some Uncle Tom type cops helping to run the jail, processing in all kinds of black cats. There were very few white prisoners in the St. Louis jail. One brother in my cell asked who I was. He wondered why I was brought to the jail in leg irons, shackles, double handcuffs, and a chain around my waist. I told him, "That's the way you travel when you're a federal prisoner." He kept asking me what my charge was until I had to tell him that I was Bobby Seale, chairman of the Black Panther Party. At first, he didn't believe me because he said, "Oh man, you're trying to job somebody." I said, "No man, I'm chairman of the Black Panther Party." I don't like to go out and brag that I'm chairman of the Black Panther Party or anything like that, but this brother, being a disbeliever, I talked to him. After a while, he was kind of believing, but he was still unsure. He had been busted for possession of some stolen property of some kind. I talked to him and some of the other brothers in there. They seemed to be really out of it. I haven't ever been in jail down south, but there was something about that jail that gave me the feeling that I was in the South. The brothers' ways and attitudes weren't in connection with anything. On the West Coast, New York or Chicago, the average cat has heard of the Black Panther Party, whereas these other guys just look at you. It's something they don't have any information on. I think that their information is so limited, so narrow, that they have a tendency to look at the Black Panther Party as something far-fetched, something that they're not going to be involved with because they assume they probably go to jail. One of the brothers I was talking to said, "Man, most of these cats down here, they're out of it, man. They don't know where it's at yet, man." That was the brother's opinion, and that brother lived in St. Louis. I was there less than 2 hours when the two marshals came up. They wrapped a chain around my waist and put on just one set of handcuffs, attached the handcuffs to the chain around my waist, and put me in the back seat of a car. I was the last one. While they left me off in St. Louis, they took George onto one of those maximum security places. Then they drove me north to Chicago.